Going to Weatherfield, Cock. Pub called the Rovers Return, Coronation Street, if you know it.
This is the story of how Julie Goodyear spent 25 years building Bet Lynch into one of the most beloved characters in British television history, walked away at the very top of her game, went back when they asked her to, and lasted just 17 days before she knew, without any doubt, that the show she had given her life to had moved on without her. That is what this video covers. Not just the departure, not just the return. The full arc of a woman who poured everything into a single role, watched it become something she no longer recognized, and spent the years since guarding the legacy she had worked so hard to build. And right now, as Julie Goodyear lives with a progressive dementia diagnosis, the story of Bet Lynch feels more necessary than ever to tell properly. So back to the beginning we go. Born in Haywood, Lancashire, Julie Goodyear arrived in the world on the 29th of March, 1942, and from early on, life came at her hard. At 13 years old, she lost her grandmother, a woman called Elizabeth Duckworth, which any longtime Coronation Street fan will recognize as a familiar name.
Bet! Correct. Give that girl a coconut.
Well, this is a nice surprise. I had no idea you were coming.
When her grandmother drowned, that kind of loss at that age reshapes a person, and there is no clean way around it. Marriage came early too. At 17, Julie wed Ray Sutcliffe. A son, Gary, arrived the following year, and then Ray walked out, leaving Julie to raise a baby alone. The marriage was later annulled, which meant Julie entered her early 20s as a single mother with no safety net and no time to feel sorry for herself. She got on with it, because that was the only option. Her stepfather, Bill Goodyear, ran a pub called the Bay Horse. Moose and Julie worked behind that bar from the mid-50s right through to the late 60s. When she eventually stepped behind the counter of the Rovers Return on national television and made it look completely effortless, that was not natural talent alone at work. She already knew that world from the inside, and every pint pulled and every awkward customer handled had gone in somewhere.
You and your mate have a drink yourselves.
Oh, thanks.
My pleasure. I served my time behind this bar. I know what it's like.
Her entry into acting was not a clean, straight line, and her first encounter with Coronation Street was brief enough that most people have forgotten it altogether. 9 episodes back in '66. A barmaid with a bit of bite who appeared, entertained, and vanished. That might have been the end of it entirely, and the whole story of Bet Lynch might never have happened. But in the spring of 1970, Julie came back permanently, and from that point forward, she and Bet Lynch became inseparable in a way that only happens once in a generation of television. Now, there are characters in soap opera who are popular, and then there are characters who become genuinely iconic. The kind that stop being fictional and start feeling like people you know. Bet Lynch was the second kind, without question. The look was unmistakable from 30 yards. Platinum beehive, leopard print, heavy makeup, chandelier earrings. Every element of her appearance was a statement. Here was a woman with very little money, very little status, and absolutely no apology for any of it. She dressed like she owned the place, because on some level, she always believed she did, and there was a defiance in that which audiences recognized immediately. What made Bet more than just a memorable image was the weight of the writing underneath.
Thank you very much. You don't look in bad nick yourself. You're still smoking, I see.
Audrey, I'm still everything, love.
The writers gave her real pain to carry, and she carried it. She discovered she had an illegitimate son, Martin, who came looking for her, and then was killed before any kind of proper relationship between them could form. Bet had to process a grief she could not even acknowledge the way a mother should be allowed to. She had a breakdown. A priest talked her back from the edge. It was one of the most emotionally striking storylines the show had produced up to that point. And Julie Goodyear did not just perform those scenes. She inhabited them completely, and viewers watching at the time have never forgotten how it felt. Through the 70s and into the 80s, Bet became more and more central to the fabric of the street. Romances, heartbreaks, and moments of sharp comedy and moments of raw vulnerability. She was the barmaid who never quite received the life she deserved, and yet every single morning she showed up for her shift with her head up and her lipstick on.
Anyway, never mind all this ancient history. Just give me a straight answer. Are we going carnival?
No.
Then, in January of '85, everything shifted. Bet Lynch was handed the keys to the Rover's return. She became the landlady. Over 21 million viewers watched that episode. 21 million people sat down on a January night to watch Bet Lynch finally claim her moment. And she delivered it with everything she had. The leopard print coat, the proud walk behind the bar, the look on her face that said she had been building to this for 15 years. It was the kind of television moment that stops feeling like entertainment and starts feeling like a shared national memory. But life off-screen was keeping pace with the drama on it. Back in '79, Julie had been told she had cervical cancer. 2 operations followed, including a hysterectomy, and her doctors gave her approximately a year to live. She did not die. She fought through it. She recovered. And then she did something with that recovery that speaks to the kind of person she actually is. She helped found the Julie Goodyear Cancer Screening Center at the Christie Hospital in Manchester so that other women might get the same chance she had been lucky enough to get. Not just survival, but survival turned into something useful. Her personal life carried its own complications. The marriage to Tony Rudman in '73 ended when he left her for her best man, which is a sentence that takes a moment to fully land. Richard Scrobb arrived in '85, and that marriage dissolved in '87. 3 marriages behind her, a son to raise, a cancer diagnosis that should have ended her story before it properly reached its peak. And still she was turning up to those cobbled streets and making Bet Lynch look like she belonged nowhere else on Earth. On screen in '87, Bet married Alec Gilroy, and the dynamic those 2 characters created gave the show some of its richest material of that whole era. Alec grumpy and practical, Bet passionate and slightly chaotic, the 2 of them grating against each other in ways that produced real television gold. And then the fire. In June of '86, The Rover's Return burned on screen, a massive dramatic set piece that the production team had built towards carefully. During the filming of it, something went genuinely wrong. Julie Goodyear's nightdress caught fire. The scream that audiences heard on television was not acting. It was a real woman in real danger. She was not seriously hurt, but the detail matters because it says something about how thin the line between Julie and Bet had become. The boundary between performer and character sometimes simply ceased to exist. By the early '90s, Julie Goodyear had given Coronation Street the better part of 25 years. Her face was as recognizable as any in the country, and Bet Lynch had become part of the national furniture, as much a fixture of British life as a Sunday roast or a kettle on the boil. And then in the spring of '95, Julie made an announcement that caught almost everyone off guard. She was leaving, not because anyone had pushed her, not because of a row or a contract falling through. Leaving because she chose to, because she wanted what she described as Julie time now, and because walking away while it still felt right seemed more important than staying until it didn't. 25 years is a long time to give anything, and she had given those years completely. In August of '95, Julie Goodyear collected the first ever National Television Awards Lifetime Achievement Award, the very first one at the very first ceremony. And the timing of it felt deliberate even if it wasn't. Then, in October of that same year, Lynch left The Rover's Return in her regular final scenes, her departure deliberately bittersweet, bags packed, taxi waiting, alone in the end after being let down by the people around her. Over 18 million viewers watched her go. And that should have been the perfect ending, sealed and complete. But 7 years later, the phone rang. By 2002, Coronation Street found itself in a serious ratings battle with EastEnders, and the producer at the time, Kieran Roberts, landed on a solution that must have seemed obvious in the boardroom: bring back one of the greatest characters the show had ever produced. Julie Goodyear agreed. A one-year contract was signed at the start of 2002, and in June of that year, Lynch returned to the screen. 17 days of filming later, Julie Goodyear was done. What happened in those 17 days is one of the most revealing stories in British soap opera history, because walking back through those doors in 2002, Julie did not find the show she had left. The Coronation Street she had known ran 3 episodes a week. By 2002, it had expanded to 5, and what sounds like a simple scheduling adjustment had in practice transformed how the entire production operated. Rehearsals, which had once been the backbone of how scenes were built and found and made to breathe, those were gone. The pace left no room for them. You arrived, you filmed, you moved on, and the conveyor belt kept turning regardless. Julie described it in those exact words later. A conveyor belt. 27 Rovers scenes arrived in front of her, and filming began at the end of them. In her response when told this was direct: "Sorry, the end?" Throughout her entire career, she had started at the beginning of a story and built upward through it, finding the accumulation of detail that made the final moments land properly. Instead, she found herself dropped into the closing scene of sequences she had no runway into, working backwards through material she had not yet made sense of from the front. The generational divide inside the cast made it harder still. The actors who had been on the show during the transition from 3 episodes a week to 5 had been brought along gradually, given time to adjust and find their feet in the new rhythm. The newer cast members had never known any other way of working and had no reason to think anything was missing. This was simply how television got made, as far as they were concerned. And in Julie Goodyear, one of the most experienced performers in the show's 40-year history, walked in carrying the habits and the knowledge of a different era, and found those habits had no place in the new machine. After 17 days, her doctor signed her off with stress and exhaustion. The departure reportedly came through by fax. The return, that the entire country had hoped would be a triumph, ended before it properly started, and the one-year contract that had been signed with such optimism was effectively finished before it filled a single month. When she spoke about it on Piers Morgan's Life Stories in September of 2013, Julie chose honesty over resentment, which is worth noting in itself. She admitted she regretted going back. She had been asked to return as a favor, she said, and she had agreed out of loyalty. As what nobody had told her were the changes that had taken place in her absence. She walked in and discovered a world that no longer matched the one she had given her best years to. And by the time she understood what had happened, 17 days of filming had already proved the point. 8 episodes from that return were recorded. The Rover's return needed a landlady, so in came Lillian Spencer, played by Maureen Lipman, and then Shelley Unwin, played by Sally Lindsay. The bar that Bette Lynch had ruled with such complete authority passed into other hands, and the show continued on exactly as it had before Julie arrived. Her position after that was stated plainly. She told the Daily Star she would never play Bette Lynch on screen again. With quantity, you lose quality, she said. And she was a perfectionist. 25 years and over 2,000 episodes had earned her the right to call it that. The schedule now was far tougher than anything she had worked under, and her legacy as it stood was worth protecting. That phrase tells the whole story in 4 words: leave her legacy as it was. Because what Julie Goodyear understood, and understood with a clarity that most performers in her position would not have had the discipline to hold on to, was that Bette Lynch's power lived in the version that existed in people's memories. The landlady at the height of her reign. The woman with the beehive and the heart of gold who built the Rovers into the gravitational center of the entire street. Every additional return risked blurring that image, replacing the memory of the legend with something smaller. One final appearance did come. In November of 2003, 7 episodes filmed in Blackpool brought Bette back for the last time. A reunion with Liz MacDonald, a near wedding to a man called Cecil Newton, who died of a heart attack on the day he was to marry her, and then a quiet departure back to Brighton with Liz. Even at the very last moment, Bette Lynch could not quite reach the happiness she had always been stretching towards. That was the final time she appeared on Coronation Street, and somehow it felt right that the ending carried that particular bittersweet note. The years that followed belonged to Julie Goodyear rather than Bette Lynch. Her personal assistant, Janet Ross, had been part of her life for a long time, and Julie has spoken openly about being bisexual, including the relationship with Janet, who passed away in 2012. And in 2006, she published her autobiography, Just Julie. 2 years before that, in 2004, she won the celebrity survival series, I'm Famous and Frightened. A brief appearance in Hollyoaks in October of 2006 turned out to be her final acting role, though nobody announced it as such at the time. Then in the summer of 2012 came Celebrity Big Brother, a £300,000 appearance that ended on day 22 with Julie being booed as she walked out. Most people who care about her story prefer not to linger there. Scott Brand is a happier chapter entirely. Julie met him in '96, and he is 26 years younger than her, which has never appeared to bother either of them in the slightest. He proposed every single day for 11 years before she finally said yes, and they married in 2007. The persistence alone should tell you something about the man, and the events of the past few years have confirmed it in a way nobody would have chosen. Early in 2023, Julie Goodyear was diagnosed with dementia. The news was made public in June of that year. And since then, Scott has given up his own career to care for her full time. He has described her as slowly fading away. She struggles now to recognize the people around her and tends to call everyone Scott, regardless of who they are. The makeup and the leopard print and the fierce pride in her own appearance that defined her for decades, the things that were so deeply woven into who she was that they seemed permanent. That interest has faded with everything else. Primrose Hill Farm, the home they had shared, listed for £1.5 million and eventually sold in 2025, with the two of them relocating to somewhere more manageable in Lancashire. In March of 2024, Scott took part in the Alzheimer's Society's campaign called The Long Goodbye, bringing wider attention to what it means to care for someone whose personality and memory are gradually withdrawing from the world. Then, in March of 2025, he shared a photograph from Julie's 83rd birthday, later deleted after it attracted a backlash online. Stay with that for a moment. The woman in that photograph gave over 2 decades of her life to a single television show and made it something that 21 million people sat down to watch on a January night. She survived cancer when her doctors gave her roughly a year. She turned that survival into a screening center that has helped other women receive the same chance she received. And she protected her own legacy with an intelligence and a self-discipline that most people in entertainment never manage, because she understood what it was worth and refused to dilute it for the sake of another contract or another paycheck. And she did something genuinely rare. She tried to go back, found the world had moved on without her, accepted that truth without bitterness, and spent the years that followed making sure the memory of Bette Lynch stayed exactly where she wanted it. The 2002 return carries a particular kind of sadness when you look at it clearly. Julie Goodyear did not leave Coronation Street in '95 feeling pushed out or forgotten. 18 million viewers sent Bette Lynch off in style. A Lifetime Achievement Award sat in her hands, and the decision to go had been entirely hers. She left as the one who chose. But going back 7 years later, she encountered something she had not prepared for. The show had not been waiting for her. It had carried on, evolved, changed its entire working culture. And the Coronation Street of 2002 was a different institution from the one she had devoted herself to. The older cast had adjusted gradually. The newer cast had never known anything else. And Julie, one of the most experienced performers in the program's history, walked in and found she no longer fitted the shape of the thing she had helped create. The conveyor belt does not stop. That was the reality. And the show she had joined in the spring of 1970, the one with rehearsals, 3 episodes a week, scenes built from the beginning and worked up to their proper height, that show no longer existed either. So in the end, there were 2 departures from Coronation Street for Julie Goodyear. The one in '95 that she controlled, that felt triumphant, that went out on her terms, and the quieter, harder one in 2002, when 17 days of filming made it clear that what she had come back for was gone. The second departure is the one that tells you the real story. And now, as Scott Brand cares for his wife in a Lancashire home, and as the Rover's return continues on the screen without Bette Lynch, the legacy Julie Goodyear protected with such care and such stubbornness is doing exactly what she always hoped it would. Bette Lynch was voted the nation's favorite television landlady in a 2013 survey of pubgoers. A wax figure of her stands at Madame Tussauds in Blackpool. Her star sits on the Manchester Walk of Fame. An MBE arrived in the New Year Honours of '96, and the Freedom of the Borough of Rochdale was awarded in 2017. One last detail, worth keeping because it captures the reach of what she created. When Freddie Mercury built his drag character for the music video of I Want to Break Free back in '84, the character he based it on was Bette Lynch. That is the measure of this woman's cultural footprint. Julie Goodyear walked into a pub in Haywood as a teenager working for her stepfather. She carried everything she learned there into a fictional pub on a fictional street in Manchester, and what she built from it will outlast all of us. She tried to go back. She found the place had changed. She made her peace with that, guarded what she had built, and spent the rest of her life making sure the memory was worth keeping. That is the story of Bette Lynch. That is the story of Julie Goodyear. And it remains one of the finest stories British television has ever had to tell.